Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 20th of February and you're joined by myself, Philip Mathard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 405 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. And once again, we've gathered together this week's big industry stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place. And in fact, Phil, if we were a box set, this would actually be season 7, episode 9.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a long time ago now, 2015, since the podcast started. But I suppose when you put in context that this is a weekly podcast and we're on number 405, it's a reasonable time, isn't it? That one, but
it is, yes,
still
yeah.
going.
So it was launched in 2015 because you were there from the start, more or less, weren't you, Phil?
Near enough, yeah. I was an original guest on the podcast, so yeah, I think it was new at the time as well. I mean, the idea that podcasts on the weekly podcasts were a thing. I mean, today it seems that everybody's doing podcasts with the COVID lockdown, etc. But back in 2015, it was kind of fresh to the market, fresh to the industry, just to talk about what was happening in the headlines, and we're still here today, all these years on, and as you say there, Curtis, a significant box set if you were to try and binge watch that one, or binge listen to it, should I say.
Yes, yeah. No, well, I've been on board since 2016 because I was invited on to talk about the London Motor Show, so I was on as a guest, and I've never left.
Was that back in the day that we could go to events?
Yes, yeah, remember those.
Yeah, remember them. So, I mean, what a week again with the headlines, and we must give a shout out with what a great interview and first time on the podcast from Mike Hawes, who's the CEO of the SMMT, and he went through, obviously talking through how we saw the market in 2020, what was happening through the manufacturers, what was happening through the different sectors, and as he said, it's not just cars, it's not just vans. I mean, he was talking coaches and HGV and all matters of transport, of what's been happening through those markets, and he shared his thoughts on what he felt that 2021 would look like and the impact as we move towards the EV market and obviously with the EU exit situation as well. So a very, very insightful interview. And to be fair, I mean, we struggled getting it into 45 minutes, didn't we? I mean, we could have gone on hours.
We did, yeah. You're right. It was wide-ranging, and Mike was on top form, very frank. And it was quite encouraging, actually, because he said, he admitted that he's a glass half full merchant, because sometimes when we're going through the stories, especially the new car regs, and they've been down month on month, year on year, you don't sense any optimism. But speaking to Mike, he is actually pretty optimistic, and there are some reasons for optimism, and he did cover a lot of ground, including Euro 7, which we're not hearing a lot about, but that is now on the horizon, and what that will mean to OEMs and indeed dealers. So do check that out. It's available from wherever you find your podcasts, or just go on to Philip or my Twitter or LinkedIn pages, and you'll find it there.
Yeah, and there's, like you say, all the highlights of all the interviews as well. So listen back, because the one previous to that with Steve Labasse from the BDO, talking about the Motor 150. Again, extremely insightful interview there, and a lot of the stuff that we talked about with Mike covered off some of the stuff that we were sort of talking to Steve Labasse about as well. So, great there, and lots more interviews to come throughout February. The remainder one is left of February and into March as well. So keep tuned in for that.
And we'll drop in a little extract from the interview, so stay to the end and listen to that. But headlines this week: new car orders struggle ahead of the March plate change. Used car dealers are more positive now than pre-COVID. A new YouGov poll reveals car buyers want to buy their next car in a showroom. Ford and Jaguar Land Rover commit to electric futures, but will Jaguars be with JLR? Staying with electric, 1 in 5 buyers now looking to purchase an EV. And finally, we've got the first dealer acquisition of the year.
And I think the intimation is a lot more to come on dealer acquisitions, I think, is the rumour. But yeah, we'll get on to the first story. And this is a bit of, well, actually research for myself within Cox Automotive and looking at sort of the new car order bank for the franchise dealers and how the lockdowns has impacted on their sector. And we talked about this, didn't we, with Mike around the January figures and what's happening as we build towards the new plate in March. But it is having an impact, and the closer we are to the March plate and into March itself, the more severe the impact it's going to be on the franchise dealers, because they need the showrooms open, don't they? I think is the main element of this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes from Mike was that every day counts now. Every day that showrooms are closed counts. So from this research that you guys at Cox Automotive did, 75% of dealers reported a downturn in forward orders of between 10 to 50%.
Yeah, that's it. I think the significant impact was, it was only 11% reporting up to 10%. What percentage it is, do apologise, but 1 in 10 saying that their order bank at that stage of the month was down 10%, up to 10%. But the majority, 57% of those that were surveyed, reported that their order bank for March was as much as 30% down, which is a significant drop in March order take that is hitting them. Now, the question comes out around, how much of this is down to the EU exit and supply of vehicles, and we've got some stories about the market from Ford and Jaguar later on. But how much of it is down to supply of vehicles, but actually how much of it is down to the fact that the showrooms are closed. And there is a significant noise now coming out from the sector, and as you say there, every day counts, as Mike said, from the franchise and independent dealer network about getting showrooms open. They've spent a lot of money on investment for PPE equipment and social distancing measures and everything else, and they are getting a lot more pressure now to get these car showrooms open to the public.
Yeah, there is a lot of understandable frustration out there, because the car retailers have proved that they can trade safely, that they have the protocols in place, and they just want to reopen now and have that certainty.
And then the connected to the similar stories is one with AM Online, and this is coming from Next Gear Capital, based on that same kind of sentiment from the dealer network as to what's happening in their market at the minute, their expectations as to where the COVID pandemic has hit them in terms of their outlook for the sector as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so within this research, 43% of dealers predict that used vehicle profit margins will rise throughout the course of 2021. And this is actually up on January, isn't it? So there's more optimism than there was last month, because the figures for January showed that 54% anticipated a reduction in their fortunes. So a timely turnaround there, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is looking at a year-on-year perspective. So where back in January of 2020, that sort of nobody really knew what the pandemic or what COVID was going to do, whether it was how close to the UK market it was going to be and what impact it was going to have if we even knew about it. It's very early on. I mean, we're obviously back in January of last year, we were hearing rumours and things like this. But actually, that outlook now is changing, and even further analysis in terms of asking what the dealers felt like their expectations for the economic condition would look like over the coming months. Interestingly, that back in January of last year, 55% felt that they would see an improvement in the economic conditions over the coming months. But actually now, because it's been such a tough period of time since the pandemic, that actually 58% feel that the economic position will improve over the coming months, which is good. That nearly 60% of the network feel that, it can only get better. The market will get better, and the economic conditions will get better for them, which is a positive outlook for the network.
Yeah, now the next story, we're actually going to the Motor Ombudsman's website. And the reason for that is that this particular story did pick up some coverage over the course of the week. But if you're after the detail, I urge you to go to the Motor Ombudsman's website, because it's all there. So the headline is, the Motor Ombudsman poll reveals car buying at showrooms remains in the driving seat. So this is based on a YouGov study commissioned by the Motor Ombudsman, and it's found that the majority of drivers remain hesitant to swap bricks and mortar for the internet when it comes to buying either a new or used car in 2021. Now, this is particularly interesting because obviously over recent weeks and months, we've been talking about click and collect, which has been click and collect and click and deliver, which have obviously been the only ways that buyers have been able to purchase new or used. But this particular survey shows that there appears to be a lot of demand from buyers to get back into showrooms. This is where they want to do their purchasing. So hopefully this is indicative of some form of pent-up demand. So the research actually polled the views of 1,800 drivers, and it revealed that if they were to purchase a vehicle this year, 62% would opt to visit a showroom in person.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of supports what we've just been saying there, that the every day counts for the motor retailers to be able to open again, whether they sell new, used in the market, whether they're a franchise dealer or independent or supermarket. I think there is an element there that there is still a proportion, and as you say there, 62% saying it, that they still want to go and visit a showroom. And I think that's the bit that we're not quite seeing, that there is an element of the market that may be looking at 2 to 3 different models of vehicles. They want to compare, they want to test drive, they want to go and see them, they want to have some interaction with the sales people face to face, and they just want to get back into that showroom environment. Now, they might go away and still buy the car online. We don't know, but actually they still want to go and see, touch and feel those vehicles at the premises, which is what the market is shouting about now. And I think this data does back that up, that there is a move to online, and there is a positive there, that a third still happy to operate in the online environment, isn't there? And they're quite happy to experience that virtual side of buying a car, but 2/3 want to go back into a showroom.
Yeah, and it's we've talked about this before. It's all about the omni-channel approach now. So once showrooms do reopen, that doesn't mean that we'll see the end of click and collect and click and deliver. Yeah, they are firmly established now. But it's all about choice, isn't it? So some customers, some buyers feel more comfortable going into showrooms, viewing the cars, test driving them, and talking to the staff there, the sales staff, and others will be more than happy to do everything online. So it's horses for courses.
No, definitely, and I think that's the key with this, isn't it? We are moving with that blended approach now with everything, but there is need for having showrooms open. So
and an interesting aside and footnote to that story. Do you know where the word ombudsman comes from?
No, go on. I always struggle saying it. Never mind where it comes from, Curtis, if I'm honest with you.
Well, it's a little bit of trivia here. It's actually Norse. It's Viking for representative. So we've borrowed it from Sweden.
Oh, right.
So there you go.
There you go. So
not a lot of people know that.
Not a lot of people know that, and you don't want to just get the headlines. There you go. Trivia knowledge as well. Put that on your pub quiz, your virtual pub quiz.
So you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines, and available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favourite podcasts. And before we continue with the rest of the headlines, we've got an excerpt from the Mike Hall's interview that we did earlier in the week. You said last week in one of the press releases the SMMT put out that every day that showrooms can safely open will matter. Now, yes, we've been talking about March. It is the all-important month of the year. It looks as though showrooms won't open until the 8th at the very earliest. We don't know if they'll open after the 8th. So what will this actually mean to the new car market? Because we have click and collect and home deliveries. Can this make good on some of that shortfall?
To a certain extent, but I think, it's those that definitely want a car, will put orders in, they can order online, spec online and so forth, and the transaction can be done online. But invariably, I don't think any manufacturer goes into March with 100% of their expected sales volumes in the bank, so to speak. And a big part of that is the customer experience in the showroom, being able to look at different models, being able to talk about the various features, being able to test drive, which is not something that is certainly within in the spirit of the current lockdown. That is missing from the consumer process at the moment, and that's the bit that's going to be missing. So yes, there will be a degree, and it'll probably vary from brand to brand. It's not going to be like we were in April last year when virtually, effectively no cars were sold. But it's, considering we're normally looking at upwards of 400,000 units, we ain't going to be there. That's what I said. Every day matters. If we can't open on the 8th, I'd like to open on, the first day after the 8th that we can, because of the importance of March to the overall performance of the year and the business planning that hangs off this particular month. Not least because, we know a strong new car market is a real boost to the economy in terms of VAT receipts, VED receipts, and so forth. And if you look at the economic situation the UK is in, every pound counts too.
So as you've been saying, Curtis, very insightful interview there, and that's just a taster of a small element of it, to be fair, with Mike, because it is a good length interview there with Mike Hawes from the SMMT. I think it's just short of 45 minutes in total, but, covering a lot of areas, and I'd urge you to, if you've not listened to it already, if you want to see where the SMMT view is on the market and get some insight into it, then have a listen to that, and it's still available to listen online, and just tune in to Mike Hawes there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and do head over and check that out, because he does cover a lot of ground. So maybe pour yourself a coffee and treat yourself to that one.
But very connected. It's connection there with the next story, because the story did break on the day of the interview with Mike around the JLR announcement. Now, we're covering the story in Automotive News Europe, and this is about Jaguar's future will be electric, but is it still part of JLR? And this is them talking about, okay, so the statement of intent has come out from Thierry around the EV approach for Jaguar. But now they're starting to question what does that mean for the Land Rover side of the Tata proposition, and whether that is the same as the Jaguar and the broader picture around supply and things like this. And what's your thoughts on this one, Curtis? Because it's quite an interesting one.
Yeah, it's fascinating because you're right, the story broke at the beginning of the week, and the headlines at the time were about the £2.5 billion investment, which will see Jaguar becoming all electric by 2025 and Land Rover following by 2030. And looking at the plants, all three UK plants are to stay open, although there is a question mark over Castle Bromwich, where car production will end at some unspecified point. But the story that Automotive News Europe have picked up on is what happens next for Jaguar, because the range will be reduced. There won't be a replacement for the F-Pace or even the current sedans. And we won't actually see the previously announced XJ EV sedan, which was revealed last year. And also, all new generation cars will be built on separate platforms to Land Rovers. So it does beg the question, what is Jaguar Land Rover's long-term thinking here? What does Tata want to do with Jaguar? Is it setting it up as a standalone separate company, which could possibly be sold off at some stage in the future? And the story goes on to suggest that in terms of possible buyers, Geely, the Chinese car maker, would make a lot of sense. Obviously, it owns Volvo and Polestar, and it bought Lotus in 2017, and does have a hunger for established brands.
And I think that's the bit around this. Obviously when we talked around the JLR announcement, I think it was key that Mike did say that we've got to understand that they're not a huge player in the global market in terms of manufacturing vehicles. And as you say, there's always been talk of what will happen as we move into that EV sector, and there's collaborations and platform decisions and range of vehicles and things like this, what that will mean. And I think we are starting. I mean, this intimates that this is what we'll start to see. Is that, as you say, is that proposition for Geely? We know that Fisker's got huge aspirations around his proposition of EV vehicles. There's all sorts going on in the EV marketplace that will change what the manufacturers do, the partnerships between the manufacturers, etc., because of the platform sharing and battery usage and things like this. So it's going to be a very interesting one as this starts to pan out.
And it's worth adding that 2 days after the announcement, Jaguar Land Rover also said that 2,000 non-factory jobs would be cut globally. And it's a tried and tested PR tradition to, if you've got bad news, you slip it out after the good news. But if you do a Google search on Jaguar Land Rover at the moment, all that comes up are these 2,000 jobs, nothing about EVs. You've got to search long and hard to find EV stories.
Yeah, so I think, as you say, I mean, there's a lot going on, and there's the talk about obviously the Chinese export market and things like this. I think we're going to see a lot playing out over the coming years as we move closer to that 2030 deadline for the combustion engine, and we start to see the strategic future for some of these manufacturers as well.
Speaking of which, heading over to This Is Money, and this story broke a couple of days after the Jaguar Land Rover EV announcements, and the headline, and it's a long one, is all Fords sold in Europe will be electric by 2030, as the UK's favourite car brand is the latest manufacturer to commit to ditching petrol and diesel engines. So that kind of tells the story, as This Is Money usually does. So every Ford car sold in Europe will be all electric by 2030. By mid-2026, its entire lineup of models will actually be either plug-in hybrids or pure EVs. So there's a real statement of intent there.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, it says that it's due to spend $1 billion over the next 30 months converting its Cologne factory into its first electric car plant in Europe, and saying that some of the electric Fords sold will be built on the VW EV platforms after the two companies signed a strategic alliance back in 2019. So again, what we were saying before, this alliance now between manufacturers because of the EV technology, and we hear people talk about battery technology that it takes 7 to 10 years from the concept to become reality in that battery world of EVs. So there's a lot of collaborations taking place and alliances between the manufacturers on this technology now.
Yes, and in terms of how this announcement affects the UK, this did actually come up at the press conference, because obviously Ford has got production facilities for in Halewood, where transmissions are made, and Dagenham, where diesel engines are made. And the response from Ford was that both facilities will still be needed because there will still be ongoing demand for diesel engines for vans and indeed transmissions. So, and there's a comment here that even by 2030, we're still expecting around a third of commercial sales to be diesel. So hopefully that gives some certainty to Halewood and Dagenham.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, it's not, there's still production, as you say, that production of combustion engines still required for the van market and other markets, and there's still going to be warranty and replacement demanded as well for some time after the 2030 deadline for cars. So there's a lot going on there, and many are saying that it's a time of significant change for the sector over the next 10 years, whilst we approach, the 9 years now, should we say, whilst we approach that 2030 deadline.
Now, staying with electric, What Car, the headline there is 1 in 5 car buyers now looking to go fully electric. So this is based on What Car's 2021 electric vehicle white paper, which is an in-depth study of 10,527 responses from in-market buyers, made up of existing EV and hybrid owners, as well as petrol and diesel drivers. So this is very much, what will your next purchase be? What will the power source be? And the research found 20% of these in-market buyers are now considering a fully electric vehicle as their next car. And this is particularly significant because in 2019, when this survey was last run, that figure was just 8% of respondents saying they were considering a fully electric vehicle for their next purchase.
Yeah, it's quite, there is still range anxiety. I mean, in the study there, they talk about that 31% of the respondents said that they were worried about the range. So there's still an element of range anxiety. And interestingly, that's compared with 25% back in 2019, whilst 18% said charging was a concern compared to 15% in the first study. So actually the range anxiety and the concerns with regards to charging has increased. Now that increase could be that we've seen an increase in the switch towards EV, so therefore those considering the EV has risen, and those concerned about the range and charging infrastructure has risen with it, possibly.
Yeah, it is interesting because 2 or 3 weeks ago, we ran a story, we reported on a story where price was the main consideration, because we made the point that, okay, the list prices, they are high, but no one's paying that list price. It's being done on finance and there's all sorts of incentives around it. But range had dropped down on that list.
Yeah, it's I say there's so much going on in that EV market. We know there is a gap in terms of that understanding, knowledge for the consumer market, which is obviously a lot of people trying to support the consumers on that, this being one of them, and just trying to get that head around what that means for the market. But they're talking about the key findings from the study, the potential buyers spent researching their vehicles, that more concerns were reduced as they did it. Concerns over cost fell from an initial 41% down to less than the 35%. So again, change is happening in the consumer market around their attitude and focus on EVs as we get towards that deadline.
And finally, this week, we've got, we think it's the first acquisition of the year, the first dealer.
Could be the first publicised acquisition.
Yes, there's probably other deals going around at the moment. So this is from AM Online, and the headline is Hawkins Motor Group acquires Town & Country Nissan dealership in Truro. So this is the acquisition. It's I actually know this.
I was going to say, this is your neck of the woods, isn't it, Curtis?
Well,
say your neck of the woods, but
kind of, yes, because my wife's family come from Cornwall, so we know this stretch of road very well, the A30, and it's Town & Country have had a long-established Nissan dealership, and it's a really attractive-looking site. It's right on the dual carriageway, easily accessible. and this has been acquired by Hawkins Motor Group, and it means that Hawkins will add Nissan to their portfolio, which currently includes Citroen, Hyundai, Kia, Peugeot, Mitsubishi, and they added MG only last year. So they're based in St Austell. They're actually retaining the Town and Country name, so that the site will be rebranded as Town and Country by Hawkins, and that makes a lot of sense because Town and Country is a very popular name around that part of Cornwall.
Yeah, and I mean, they're saying that they've had a family business representing Nissan for 30 years now, so you can see why Hawkins are keen to keep that name. And it's kind of a group that you don't hear a great deal from, isn't it? I mean, it's not often we're talking about Hawkins Group, but as you say, a significant size group and representing those manufacturers there. So, they're saying they've had some exciting plans to take the business and Nissan brand further, and the first of which being opening a second Nissan dealership, Hawkins in Penryn, in South Wales there. So again, looks like there's a bit of growth there for the Hawkins Group and a partnership with Nissan.
Yeah, so the first known acquisition of the year, I dare say we'll be reporting on the next few over the coming episodes.
Yeah, well, I think Steve LeBass mentioned in his report, didn't he, that there's probably rumours of quite a few acquisitions. You can see it coming, can't you, at some point in this year. I think at the minute, the focus for many of the businesses is trying to get through this sort of lockdown, get the showrooms opening again, get activity going into the business. All right, I don't think everybody's naive enough to think that it's going to be just everything's open, that's it. I think there's probably going to be a staged approach, but it's significant that whether that's that we should be advising the government that open showrooms based on a square footage and things like this, then I think there's ways in which the showroom network can open again. To have visitors, and I think one of the things we're keen pointing out with the government is that after sales is open, but after sales accounts for 5-to-1 ratio of visits to a vehicle showroom. So, in relation to those visiting a car showroom to have a winter check or car serviced, etc., or some essential work done, then the visits to the actual showroom is significantly less and therefore controllable within the showroom environment. But again, a lot going on, I think, lots of conversations taking place. So we'll be watching this one very keenly as we approach the end of February and into March, I suspect.
Yeah, but that's all we've got time for this week. Many thanks for joining us. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Don't forget to check out our interview with SMMT Chief Exec Mike Hawes, available now wherever you're listening to this podcast. Stay safe and stay well, and join Philip and I again next weekend for all the chat that matters. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.